Now people go, well, what about the data when it agrees? Agreement of data from different methods does not verify those results. Uranium and thorium are often found together in the same mineral. For example, although calculations of the age are usually discordant, they occasionally agree. Then they harp all over. Well, yeah, but what about the disagreements? Ignore those. Don't put that in the textbooks. With respect even to the case of a mineral containing only uranium, Brown says, now there are 4 different ways we can compute the age of the mineral, namely from the ratio of lead 206, uranium 238, or lead 207 to 235, or lead 206 to lead 207, and also the ratio of helium to uranium. That's a little harder to determine. You have to have a way to collect all the helium. Ideally, all 4 of these ages should agree, but no estimate can be considered trustworthy unless at least 2 independent methods, 2 of the first 3 here, agree. But unfortunately, complicating factors often produce discrepancies in evaluating a given sample. Harrison Brown, The Age of the Solar System, Scientific American. There is even more commonly disagreement between uranium and thorium ages, but again, there is occasional agreement. As more and more evidence was gathered, the lead method began to carry conviction. There could be little doubt when pure thorium minerals associated with the same rocks with pure uranium minerals gave the same absolute age. Q.V. Mensch, Scientific Monthly. There are now even a few cases where there is agreement between ages obtained by the lead method, the rubidium method, and or the potassium method. Now, when these ages agree, that doesn't necessarily mean that their age measurements are accurate. Because remember, worldwide flood potentially is plausible, right? So plausible, it's the rule. And if that happened, all that external radiation is going to excite all these items into faster radiation external expulsion, and we have a false age that happens more rapidly than when the ice canopy was over the Earth, protecting from external radiation. So, there's good reason to present the state of progress at this time, since the newer techniques have already provided an indication of the usefulness and simplicity in providing potassium argon and rubidium strontium ages that agree for rocks for which the 2 indicated uranium lead ages disagree. These agreements, these measurements, have also shown that rubidium strontium and potassium argon ages can be made to agree with concordant uranium lead ages by a suitable choice of half-lives for potassium 40 and strontium 87. Manipulating. They allow themselves to manipulate stuff. Of course, they may often, as often the case, they dig for other samples that are more in agreement with the textbooks that they've written. The values so found lie within the large range of values for these 2 constants, which have been obtained by direct laboratory counting experiments. Lieutenant T. Aldrich, Measurement of Radioactive Ages of Rocks. But this kind of agreement is exactly what is to be expected on the basis of our deductions as to the past history of the radioactive elements as originally created and as possible subject during the creation and deluge periods to accelerated rates of decay. If any of the radiogenic elements were actually and truly created at the beginning, as seems eminently reasonable, it is most consistent with the perfect, very good character of the original creation to infer that these different radiogenic elements were created in homologous quantities. That is, if 2 or more such elements were to be included in the same created mineral or group of minerals, their relative amounts would have been the same as their relative rates of origin by radioactive disintegration from the respective parents. So they agree. But then, of course, you might have some other rocks in a similar area or nearby that don't show any corroboration at all. Furthermore, it is most likely that if these parents were also created in juxtaposition in the same minerals with them, they and each member of their respective decay chains would have been created and present in their so-called equilibrium amounts as now governed by the individual decay rates of the members in the chain. In other words, the accelerated rates would, in all these particular samples in a locale, would be accelerated uniformly. Skeptics will, of course, be immediately inclined to discard such a deduction as quite unscientific, in virtue of its being, by its very nature, unverifiable scientifically. And, of course, none of these rates are verifiable scientifically because nobody was there. And, of course, this is true to a degree, since no human experimenter can duplicate or even study processes of creation which are no longer going on. But as a matter of fact, the assumption of uniformity is equally unverifiable scientifically as far as past history is concerned as well. Nobody was there. It is only uniformitarian presupposition that decides the assumption of uniformity to be more reasonable than that of original creation. The writers strongly deny that it is unscientific to postulate a primeval and genuine creation. The two great universal principles of thermodynamics, energy conservation and deterioration, inexorably witness to the scientific necessity of original creation. Now, laws of thermodynamics, one of them is everything is devolving, not evolving. Nor is it unscientific to accept the biblical revelation, verified as it has been in countless ways, especially by the testimony of the Lord Jesus Christ himself, as a true and reliable record of that which man cannot discover without such revelation, namely the events and order of the creation. We have a pretty good idea of the events and order. First of all, just think about it. Aren't plants and animals interdependent upon each other for survival, food, and all kinds of other relationships, symbiotic and elsewise? So, if something was created many, many years later that's necessary for the survival of that thing which was created originally, but it wouldn't have survived. All those thoughts. So, all of this leads to the conclusion that if it had been possible to make a radioactive time estimate from these minerals immediately after their creation by the same methods as are now in use, they would have had indicated some finite age for the Earth, and this age, whatever it may have been, would have been the same for each of the different radiogenic elements in the mineral association. This is the most reasonable conclusion possible on the assumption of a genuine, primeval creation as recorded in Genesis. Considering the fact that in the Precambrian rock strata, all life forms, however smaller or different, but all life forms, from the simplest to the most complex, are represented there, like it all happened at once. Consider also the probable effect of the relative rates of radioactivity of the different elements during times when the environment was more radioactive than at present, such as on the first day of the creation week, and during the period of the deluge. Each element, of course, has at present a definite value for its half-life or rate of disintegration. Whatever may be the fundamental nature and cause of these respective decay processes, it is likely that each would be affected roughly, proportionately, by any environmental factor potent enough to affect them at all. For example, if the higher incidence of cosmic radiation, during any period, was such as to have, say, doubled the rate of decay of uranium into lead, it is also probable that would have also have approximately doubled the rate of decay of thorium, and that of rubidium, and that of other radioactive elements. Each rate would have been increased by a factor of the same order of magnitude, since each was subject to the same constant incidence of radiant energy. And this, of course, means that if the particular minerals were left undisturbed, they would continue to yield roughly accordant ages, though these ages would now be apparently higher than they appeared at the time of creation. Similarly, during the flood period, each decay rate would have been speeded up in the same ratio, so that the individual elements would continue to give accordant ages. Finally, at the present date, still assuming this to be one of the relatively rare cases where the minerals have remained comparatively undisturbed through all the vicissitudes of geomorphic history, the suite of minerals would still give accordant ages, but the age so indicated would obviously be much greater than that age since its creation. The fact that two or more apparently independent age estimates agree prove that the computations are valid and the age correct. The result is to be expected, regardless of whether or not the decay rates had changed in the past, and thereby it proves nothing except that the mineral under examination had probably not been disturbed and its component parts segregated since its original formation. Therefore, radioactivity age estimates cannot legitimately be used as proof of the age of the Earth or of any formation in it. So, let's get face to face with these conclusions. The evolutionists' intellectual dishonesty. This is the same topic. Conclusions, radioactive dating methods. And we have point C, the dishonesty. Not inefficiency, ineptitude, so much as dishonesty. Evolution places severe demands upon fossils used to support it. A fossil in an evolutionary sequence must have both the proper morphology of the shape to fit that sequence and an appropriate date to justify its position in that sequence. Since the morphology of a fossil cannot be changed, it is obvious that the dating is the more subjective element of the two items. Yet accurate dating of fossils is so essential that the scientific respectability of evolution is contingent upon fossils having appropriate dates. Popular presentations of human evolution show a rather smooth transition of fossils leading to modern humans. The impression given us is that the dating of the individual fossils in that sequence is accurate enough to establish human evolution as a fact. However, because of severe dating problems, which are seldom mentioned, this alleged sequence cannot be maintained. To present the fossil evidence as a relatively smooth transition leading to modern humans is akin to intellectual dishonesty. I might say something worse than that. It is impossible to give an evolutionary sequence to the human fossils because there is a coverage gap involving the dating methods which evolutionists believe are the most reliable, radiocarbon and potassium argon. This gap is from about 40,000 years ago to about 200,000 years ago on the evolutionist timescale. It covers roughly the period known as the Middle Stone Age. This coverage gap lies beyond what is considered the effective range for radiocarbon and prior to what is considered the effective range for potassium argon. This problem period may be even larger because some dating authorities believe that the effective range for potassium argon doesn't begin until about 400,000 years ago, and point two, many of the older fossils are found at sites that lack the volcanic rocks necessary for potassium argon dating, and hence cannot be dated by this method at all. Although young Earth creationists challenge the legitimacy of all of the dates obtained by the long-term radiometric methods, even evolutionists are beginning to admit that this dating gap presents a problem for them. However, the real seriousness of this problem seems to elude them, even when they occasionally refer to it in their writing.